Awesome for tuning in, guys. Today we're going to look at an XLR microphone, a dynamic XLR microphone from AKG, the AKG D5 vocal with a supercardioid pickup pattern, if I'm not mistaken. Let's bring this into focus right here. There you can see, and if you're new to microphones, the microphones usually have different pickup patterns. Cardioid is pretty common and quite useful, and this is supercardioid, so it should be a little bit more focused on your voice, which can be quite handy for people who, like me, who want to do YouTube videos, or maybe also for people who want to do podcasting and live streaming, because obviously you want that microphone to be focused on your voice and not on your surroundings. That would be a different type of mic. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it's an XLR mic, so if you want to look for a USB mic, that would be a different kind of video. I have that on my channel as well, but I personally love these XLR microphones a bit more than USB because they're simply so versatile. You can connect them to a lot of different pieces of audio gear. So that's why in part 3, I already prepped this right here. We're gonna test the AKG microphone with a different audio gear. So I have a classic Focusrite Scarlett Solo. That's a pretty common interface. A lot of people have that. So we're gonna test the AKG with this. And then secondly, I have a little bit more special, like a tube preamp. Tube preamps, they have a tube inside. I'm going to show this to you in a second, and we're going to do a little bit of a sound comparison because that's where XLR mics in generally tend to shine with the versatility, like I mentioned in the beginning. And guys, you can always use the navigation below the video. It's quite useful if you want to jump ahead. In part 2, I'm going to do an unboxing, show you a few close-up shots, and then we're going to do a little bit of a listening test, as you probably know by now if you watched some of my other videos. If you're new, let me quickly remind you that you can head over to my channel page. I show this to you here in the audio section. You can find a lot of different other reviews, for example, for lavalier mics, such as I'm using right now to record this video, and condenser mics and other USB audio interfaces. Guys, without further ado, before drawing out this intro too long, I'm excited you're here. I'm really curious to see how this microphone sounds. Supercardioid, should be super focused, great for podcasting. Let's get started with the unboxing. Let's get rolling. Now guys, we jump to part 2. I'm going to do a quick unboxing of the AKG D5. So let's just get rolling here. I talked already pretty long, and yeah, you get a product leaflet with all these products in here. It's really surprising how many different microphones one company alone produces. So that goes to show that making a bunch of these reviews can be really helpful because there is just so much product choice out there. Let's flip this around here real quick. Manual, sticker, guarantee card, nice carrying bag, always useful to have. Lots of manufacturers give you a carrying bag that's not very padded, but I think that's okay because the dynamic microphones usually they are pretty sturdy and solidly built, so also great to carry around. Now, as promised to you, and like I always like to do, the close-up shot. You see, it's fairly heavy. It's a pretty common attribute. XLR connector, and I hope this stays in focus. I can quickly turn this, show you the capsule. So inside of here we find some foam material. It probably is not, you probably don't see it, but that should protect a little bit from when you talk into the mic. And here's the capsule itself. Sometimes, once I think it happened that a different manufacturer had the same kind of capsule, but I think AKG is a pretty big company, so that should be a little bit custom kind of thing. So let's put this back on, and yeah guys, there's not much more to show. I mean, pretty nice build quality, really super sturdy, feels great in the hand. And then lastly right here, there's a microphone holder that you have to screw onto your microphone mount. Always make sure to double check that this smaller thread screw is in here, or adapters, excuse me. Depending on what microphone mount you have, you either need the smaller one or the bigger thread, so you can take this out and then put that on your microphone stand. Guys, that concludes the unboxing of the AKG microphone, dynamic microphone. Why don't we just go ahead and jump to the sound test like promised in the introductory part. That's usually what's the most interesting. So let's do a listening test. Now guys, we jump to sound test part 3, and as promised, you are right now listening to the AKG D5 dynamic microphone with the supercardioid pickup pattern directly connected to, whoops, oh, I spoke a little bit too loud there. So you see the microphone is sensitive, directly connected to the Focusrite USB audio interface. And yeah, it doesn't have phantom power, so maybe I have to turn it all the way up. It's a sensitive mic, but it sounds really good. I did a little bit of test listening. And yeah, guys, what do you think? What's your first impression? I read on the package that AKG actually holds some kind of special patent, supposedly, for a vari-motion laminated diaphragm. So maybe that has something to do with the way the microphone sounds. And yeah, I mean, the companies always try to innovate and differentiate themselves. In business administration, we call it a unique selling proposition. So good job, AKG. And guys, it seems to be really good for podcasting and live streaming. And what I'm going to do right now, like promised, we're going to just hop over to the next interface. We wanted to test 3 interfaces. And next up after the Focusrite is the Steinberg. So let's jump to the next interface and see how that sounds. Now guys, surprise, surprise. Quick change of the USB audio interface. Right now you're listening to the Steinberg interface. It's a very nicely manufactured interface. I like this a lot, especially design. It's a bit bigger than the Focusrite, and I also turned the input volume, the input gain totally up. The Steinberg uses the D3 amplifiers, and again we're testing it with the AKG D5 dynamic vocal microphone. And guys, this is always what I want to point out, that these XLR mics, I really like them a lot because you can just switch them out any way you want. So if at some point I want to use a different microphone, I could just disconnect this AKG and put in something else, or vice versa. If one day you buy a really expensive audio interface for like 500 bucks, then you can still continue to use your microphone, as opposed if you would have chosen to go the USB microphone route for your podcasting and live streaming kind of setup, then you would always be stuck to that one particular USB microphone, and you couldn't just mix and match it with different pieces of gear. And like I'm going to show you in a second, the performance is probably going to be even better if we put in a tube preamp in the middle. So that's what we're going to test next. So far so good, guys. I'm excited you're here. Let's jump to sound test part 3C with the tube preamp. And yeah, guys, this is the last device that I connected the AKG microphone to. It's my classical tube preamp, one of my favorite tube preamps that I'm using all the time, specifically usually with my Shure SM58, simply because inside this preamp is a tube, and the tube usually makes the sound warmer. Also, if you think about it, in the USB audio interface, you have the audio interface that has to do all the analog to digital conversion. It has a microprocessor chip inside and all this stuff. So to make it short, like in this tube preamp, there's a lot of space for components really dedicated to only amplifying the signal, whereas in your sound card, there's also a fair amount of space taken up for the USB and the output stage and the input stage, and so the design is a little bit different. And from my experience, this tube preamp, no matter which microphone I connect, I get a much stronger signal than when I connect a microphone directly to a USB interface. Personally, I think, and that's from my experience using the Shure SM58, that when connecting a XLR microphone, a dynamic one, that's important to say, a dynamic XLR microphone to a USB sound card directly, the preamps inside the sound card usually don't give you that high of an output volume. So that's something you can consider if you ever are in the situation where you connect the microphone to your sound card and the signal is not strong enough. You can always add in a preamp. Tube preamps, there are many different ones, so this is a little bit better one because it also allows you signal. It has an input gain, an output gain, and you can even do some signal processing in the middle. And as you can see, the sound comes from the microphone, goes into the preamp, gets preamplified, and can change a lot of things, and then goes out into my old Firewire interface, my trusty old Swissonic Firewire interface. A little bit of a specialty product. It's not sold anymore, but I like to use that. So this concludes the last test. You have gotten an idea of how this microphone can sound, and obviously it always will depend a little bit on your setup. The room acoustics have an effect. What device you ultimately use, you have an effect, but you have seen 3 examples, so that should work fine. You have learned something new. I'm excited you're here. Let's quickly jump to the last part 4, the summary and conclusion, guys. Excellent, guys. This concludes the review of the AKG D5 vocal microphone which should be pretty well suited for podcasting and live streaming. And as you have seen, I tested the microphone with 3 different audio interfaces, and in every case it performed fairly well. One thing to notice, make sure you also get an XLR cable right here, and as well as a microphone stand, because the cable and the microphone stand are obviously not included. And guys, I just looked at the footage and listened to it and took some notes, and from all I can see, this microphone seems to be a good all-around microphone, because it's really surprising how well it functioned with all of these 3 devices. The Focusrite, I think the microphone input on the Focusrite is a little bit more sensitive, so that played pretty well. Supercardioid AKG microphone that's also tends to be a little bit more sensitive than my standard Shure, so that played well. With the Steinberg, I know the Steinberg uses these D3 preamplifiers, but from all my testing different microphones on these devices, the D3 was a little bit less sensitive than the Focusrite, but the Steinberg sounded very nice and neutral. And finally, the tube preamp, probably one of my favorite devices, so that's my secret tip. If you want to improve the sound even further, you can consider put a tube preamp in the middle to get even more out of this AKG D5 vocal microphone. And maybe if you have never seen that, I can also show this to you here real quick. For example, my tube preamp uses a 12AX7 tube, and in these tubes, obviously, if the signal from the microphone, regardless of microphone use, goes through here, it should give you a little bit of a warmer sound. And these 12AX7s, they are manufactured from different manufacturers. This is for example, is a Russian Electro Harmonics, but obviously there are different manufacturers, so you can really also vary the sound by not only putting a tube preamp in, but also using different tubes potentially. However, in all fairness, if you're just starting out, it might also be a little bit overkill to get the tube preamp straight away. For the most part, people will probably just use the USB interfaces, Focusrite, Steinberg, Behringer. So there are a bunch of different manufacturers that make these interfaces. And then if you desire so at some point, you can always, if you want, add in a tube preamp in the middle in the signal chain. And that's always what I'm preaching. That's why I love these XLR microphones way more than the USB, is because you can just mix and match different pieces of gear. If at some point you want to upgrade the USB interface, you upgrade the interface, you can still use the mic. If at some point you want to upgrade the mic, it works equally well, you can still use the USB interface, and vice versa. Guys, this concludes this review, and I invite you also to head over to my channel page, because a lot of people like to compare before they make a purchase. I show this to you here, and in the audio section you will be able to find different mics, XLR, condenser, dynamic, USB mics, as well as USB mixers, or also lavalier mics such as this, so you can really get a little bit more knowledgeable if you want to do podcasting, live streaming, or like me, these YouTube videos. Guys, you have learned something new today. Excellent for tuning in. I see you as a subscriber, and in the next video. All the best to you, and have fun with your new gear. Take care. And because you just watched the review of the AKG microphone, you might also be interested in comparing it, for example, against the USB microphone, such as this Samson C0U, for which you also find a review on my channel page in the audio section. And I'm truly amazed about how many people have already subscribed because of the useful videos that I produce for you here. You can subscribe right now as well. I see you in the next video. Take care.